something is wrong. They want to be integrated. They begin to follow a form of music performed by integrated doo-wop groups. And here come some white musicians from the country and the South, like Elvis Presley, who had grown up with black folks, and people like Chuck Berry, who possessed an integrated sound and style, and it was called rock and roll. And the kids loved it because they could express a national desire to be free of the hypocrisy of segregation and all the repression that we had come to embrace. Moving away from the spirit of the jazz age and the swing era, we had begun to curl into a ball of fear after the Depression and the war. Those kids took their disposable income and created the first kid culture the world had ever seen. It presaged a revolution, but the largest segment of the population by this time had forgotten how to dance. It's time for us to remember what it feels like to be a nation of real dancers. That's just a small part of what our music reveals about our identity. And the generation gap served us well in the 1950s to create social change and sell recordings. But now, in 2012, this concept has not fared well against the passage of time. I'm suggesting that the generation gap with kids being hipper than adults is a farce, and it doesn't serve us well. I'm suggesting that music is one of the principal carriers of this outmoded way of thinking. And as it liberated kids in the 50s and 60s, it now enslaves. Today, we're in desperate need of a discerning body of listeners. I'm saying music instructors seem, to me, should be the arbiters of taste for the community. We're trained in music. We're qualified to lead the ascendancy of our community's engagement with music. While we're following people who don't know anything about music at all. We must first educate and demand more from ourselves. When we discover the best of what our musical arts have created, we're going to become angry. And that anger fuels a desire to create a better world for our families, students, and country. That intensity of emotion causes us to adopt an aggressive insistence on quality. And quality always attracts and holds the interest of those who realize that they've been exploited by mediocrity. In 2012, the realization of this exploitation will create a desire for a more truthful and harmonious way. More harmonious between the generations, between the sexes, and the ethnic groups, all of whom have been callously stereotyped and exploited by the marketplace and delivered directly to unsuspecting kids through music. And even if we even recognize it, because many times it's so commonplace we don't recognize it. We, instructors, teachers, parents, are left to pick up the pieces and demand change. Or we always can just play whatever is popular regardless of quality and call it a day. It's much easier. You won't get bad reviews. But we are the academy. We are the teachers, the leaders. We're supposed to be those who know. Our nation is in a cultural crisis, and this crisis compels us to call for a new type of American musicianship. One that encompasses more of the truth of our musical journey on this land. Then, and only then, can we create more support for the arts in successive generations. More support in our schools, deeper parental engagement, and an elevation of national consciousness to the point that no parent ever has to fight against unwinnable odds for funding of a music program at their local school. I see a time when the very best of our American arts led by music are studied, performed, viewed, and treasured by communities of all hues, persuasions, and means, integrated by their love and knowledge of our mutual heritage. A lot of dues have already been paid, and it's so much deeper than it looks. But this transformation will not be free of charge, oh no. The body of melodies, songs, and pieces that transcend all barriers has already begun don't know what, we don't want to know them because they're not going to be reinvented. It will cost us our contemporary comfort zone. And let us remember, when we think about the cost and the benefit, let's remember all of the people who invested in our education and realize that we're endowed by their very investment with the skills to create a richer world than they could have ever possibly envisioned. This is our inheritance. This is our charge. It is the weight of our ancestors and the super realization of the dreams of our mentors. As I grow older, I reflect on the many great teachers and mentors I have had. And I consider actually less the technical stuff that they taught me and the technical advice. Practice this scale or exercise. I'm always around kids and they're asking me, what did you do when you were 13? Or what did you do when you were 14? What did you do when you were 16? As I grow older, I tend to dwell more on what my teachers wanted to see in the world through their involvement with young people in the sacred art of music. I go back and I think first of my father. When I was born, he was a band director in small towns, poor towns in Louisiana, like Breaux Bridge and Opelousas. He struggled with his students. He didn't even talk about music. He just talked about them speaking English. One of his fellow directors was John Fernandez. That was my first teacher. I was 6 years old. He told me that the instrument was too serious for what I was doing. He said, don't come back. And I did. Instead of giving me gold stars, he put bad marks on my paper. At that time, I was struggling to play the Marine hymn. At 8, I played in the Fairview Baptist Church marching band under the instruction of Danny Barker. Mr. Barker taught us to fulfill the role of our instrument. So what that meant was, man, play some lead on that trumpet, son. And we played songs like Just a Closer Walk with Thee and Down by the Riverside. So every step along the way, I was learning some music. I learned a lot of traditional New Orleans music. And let me tell you, we weren't interested in learning that. This was in the era of the Big Afro. Nobody was thinking about no Hello Dolly. We weren't thinking about that. But thank the Lord I was there to learn a body of music I still can remember and recall instantly. My next teacher at 10 was named Alfred Vance. He taught me out of an Arthur's book, and I had to play songs like I Dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair. Also not a favorite. I stopped taking lessons from him because he told me I needed to practice. And I told my father, man, I don't need lessons to be told something that I know already. At 11, I studied with a guy named Joe Smith because I liked his afro. He played in one of the most popular funk bands in New Orleans at that time. I would get to his house on Sunday morning and he always had a girl in there. It was a shotgun house, so you could see from the front door through the whole house. And he would always open the door enough for me to see inside and would pretend that he was angry that I had come, all the while giving me a peek. He didn't teach me too much about the trumpet. We studied out of the Ruben Method book. My next teacher when I was 12 was named John Long. He agreed to teach me for $5. And then, because everybody was struggling at that time, he said he would trade for piano lessons with my father. He never took the piano lessons. My lessons would be 2 or 3 hours long. At my first lesson in a double shotgun house, in which one side was burned out, he said the foundation of playing was sound. And he played on a beat-up record player 2 recordings for me. The Chicago Symphony with Adolph Herseth, playing pictures at an exhibition, and Clifford Brown with strings, with Clifford Brown playing a portrait of Jenny. I can remember this like it was yesterday. All his kids running around. He told me to learn both of these opening passage of pictures and the whole Clifford Brown solo by ear from the recording. And he said, man, you have to hear sound, brother. You have to hear sound. They don't print sound on music. You have to hear sound. So I started trying to practice on my sound. As a freshman, my high school band director was George Marks. He knew that my father was a great musician. But my audition was so sad. He asked, are you sure you're Ellis's son? I'm not making none of this up. In our band, we played pieces like The Stars and Stripes Forever and Francis Macbeth's Incantation and Dance. Mr. Marks was a trumpeter and he loved jazz. He asked to borrow some of my father's Clifford Brown Maxwell recordings, and for some reason, that always impressed me because those recordings were largely unknown at that time. I mean, we were listening to Parliament Funkadelic and James Brown. Clifford Brown, Tony knows, you remember that time, man, over there. New Orleans boy right there, we played all these bands together. My next teacher at 14 was named Norman Smith. He was principal trumpet in the New Orleans Symphony. I would always see Norman's girlfriend, and she played violin, and I thought that it was a hickey she had on her neck. So I would say, man, the dude, he looks very conservative, but he must be kind of wild. I'm telling you what I thought. He taught me to play with a clear attack, and we worked on pieces like the Humble Trumpet Concerto and Stravinsky's Petrushka. He gave me exercises. Get a good popping attack. During the same time, William Fielder, trumpet professor from Mississippi Valley State, came to New Orleans. And my first trumpet teacher, who had sent me home when I was 6, John Fernandez, brought him to my house. And Fielder gave me a lesson. He left me with a piccolo trumpet. I had been listening to a Maurice Andre record, and I had never heard of a piccolo trumpet. So I asked him, man, how does he do get this sound on these? I was trying to play the Leopold Mozart Concerto on B-flat trumpet. He said, man, he's playing a piccolo trumpet. He started laughing at me like I should know what it was. He went to the car and brought out a piccolo trumpet and said, if you can play the third movement of the Brandenburg Concerto No. 2 by the time I get back, I'm going to let you have this horn. I put a mouthpiece in and nothing came out. First I thought it was a deal. Then I said, I made sure he wasn't seen back to my house until I could play. He then gave me that Queen on trumpet right on the spot and threw in a Bach F trumpet for $50. At 15, I attended the Eastern Music Festival and heard a master class by Yo-Yo Ma. He was a little older than us, and his name sounded like Yo Mama. We would never forget him. And his master class went on for 2.5 hours. And even though I was a trumpet player and above strings and cellos and all that kind of stuff, every one of us looked around and said, man, this dude is like 18 or 19 or something. This is a cello he's playing. We were inspired and lifted. And it's a memory all of us share. We can remember how startled we were at his greatness and how impressed we were with his humanity and the gracious way that he treated all of us and the time that he spent. And there's never a time that I see him now, through these years, that I don't hug him and give him love and thank him for that single masterclass that transformed a portion of what I thought in my own life of what was achievable. I studied at the Eastern Music Festival with Big John McElroy. He was from Alabama. I was from Louisiana. We played pieces like Handel's Royal Fireworks music and Shostakovich's First Symphony. At the end of camp, one of the conductors, Robert Helmsley,